Hey guys, it's Tyken here. I'm back with another video for you, so let's dive right in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know which manhwa you want to see next. Let's go!
In the midst of the confusion, a woman had a sudden realization. It all started with a letter. The young man, Xiaolin, tried to make sense of the fragmented memories flooding his mind. He was completely overwhelmed, his thoughts spiraling out of control. He found himself in a strange hall, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. It felt like a nightmare, a kidnapping. A splitting headache hit him as he desperately tried to remember how he got there, but his memories were a confusing mess, offering no clear answers. Just a short while ago, his life had been completely different. He was Xiaolin, a fresh university graduate. To make a living, he worked as a game booster, skillfully turning losing matches into epic comebacks. Another victory was secured. After a long session, he leaned back, satisfied with his work for the day. Later, he relaxed on his bed, casually scrolling through his phone. It was just another ordinary night, or so he thought. But his peace was often disturbed by the memory of his father's harsh words. To prove he wasn't useless, Xiaolin had moved out on his own. Then, late one night, an unexpected knock echoed through his apartment. A delivery man handed him a strange, unmarked package. This was only 2 days after he had moved in. He opened the mysterious package, only to find a strange, dark substance oozing from within. Suddenly, an unknown energy erupted from the box, wrapping around Xiaolin's body against his will. The source of the power was an admission letter to a place called Dawn Academy, and it had just initiated a forced teleportation. When he regained consciousness, the world was spinning, leaving him completely disoriented. A wave of nausea washed over him as he tried to get his bearings. He found himself on the floor of a strange hall, looking up at an imposing man who seemed unimpressed by his condition. Xiaolin wasn't alone. Others were there too, panicking and shouting that they had been kidnapped. The man in charge simply watched their desperate pleas with an annoyed expression. Deciding he'd had enough of the noise, he reached for the hilt of his sword. In a single, fluid motion, he drew his weapon, unleashing a terrifying wave of power. The sheer force of his attack silenced the crowd, their protests turning into screams of terror. He then introduced himself as Qin Chuan, the counselor for Class 7 of Dawn Academy, declaring them all to be the chosen ones. The group, including Xiaolin, was left speechless and intimidated by the overwhelming show of force. Qin Chuan seemed frustrated by the time that had been wasted, eager to begin what he called the potential assessment. But amidst the chaos and fear, Xiaolin was already analyzing his surroundings, trying to understand the scale of his new reality. Qin Chuan laid out the terms. They were to undergo intense training to prove their worth and earn the right to enter a so-called new world. The crowd reacted with immediate disbelief and outrage. One man, in particular, voiced the group's skepticism, openly questioning the counselor's sanity. Unlike the others, Xiaolin remained silent, observing the chaos while trying to process the unbelievable situation. The potential assessment began with the first person stepping into a strange device, his mind racing with theories about their predicament. Qin Chuan monitored the process, analyzing the data that appeared on his holographic interface. One by one, the chosen ones completed their assessments, some celebrating their results with confidence. Others, however, approached the platform with visible apprehension, unsure of what to expect. When it was Xiaolin's turn, the machine took an unusually long time, beeping continuously as he stood inside. The prolonged process seemed to take a toll on him, the strain evident on his face. The delay piqued Qin Chuan's interest, making him wonder if they had finally found a truly exceptional talent. After what felt like an eternity, the assessment finally ended, and Qin Chuan eagerly moved to check the results. But what he saw on the screen left him utterly shocked. The data revealed Xiaolin's stats to be abysmally low across the board. Qin Chuan's initial hope instantly turned to sheer disgust and contempt. The results were so disappointing that Qin Chuan couldn't even bear to look. For Xiaolin, however, this feeling of being underestimated was nothing new. The instructor voiced his frustration, declaring that his high hopes had been a complete waste. He believed that even giving the young man an ID tag for the upcoming test would be pointless. Xiaolin stood isolated under the weight of yet another judgment. Throughout his entire life, he had been haunted by the same label from everyone he knew. But this time, a defiant smile spread across his face. He resolved that he, and only he, would decide his own worth. With a look of pure skepticism, Qin Chuan held out the golden ID tag. Before he could even finish his thought, a hand shot out to grab it. Xiaolin snatched the tag directly from the instructor's grasp. He then declared that he would take the test, regardless of what the numbers said. Amused by his nerve, Qin Chuan told him to go ahead, certain that reality would teach him a harsh lesson. Suddenly, a young woman in the crowd spoke up, asking about the Academy's promises of power and wealth. Qin Chuan's tone shifted entirely as he turned to address her, recognizing her as the one with the highest potential in the room. The other students were stunned by the revelation. They couldn't believe that the unassuming young woman was the most powerful among them. Qin Chuan addressed her directly, confirming her name was Gu Xiaoyue. The woman adjusted her glasses, calmly taking in the instructor's words. He explained that while her attributes were the highest, she unfortunately lacked a special talent. However, he offered to clarify how the Academy's currency system of credits and redemption points worked. Gu Xiaoyue simply nodded, indicating she understood. Xiaolin watched from the sidelines, surprised that this polite-looking woman was considered the strongest of the new recruits. With that settled, Qin Chuan turned back to the entire group and instructed them to check their own attribute values using their golden ID tags. Following the instructions, Xiaolin held up his tag and it beeped to life. A holographic screen appeared before him, displaying his name, Xiaolin, along with his pathetically low initial stats. But it was the warning at the very bottom that made his blood run cold. Each death would cost him 10 years of his life, and if his lifespan hit 0, he would die permanently. The same horrifying realization rippled through the crowd as everyone discovered the deadly rule. The promise of a new life was, in fact, a death game. Amidst the growing panic, a sudden beep sounded in Xiaolin's mind. A strange new interface appeared around him, a notification that seemingly only he could see. The young man was completely overwhelmed, his mind struggling to process the life or death stakes in this new mysterious event. But as the initial shock subsided, a glimmer of determination appeared in his eyes. This strange notification might just be his only trump card for survival. As the chaos unfolded around him, Xiaolin focused on the new interface in his mind, weighing his options carefully. A moment later, a spark of resolve ignited within him. He had made his choice. With a newfound sense of purpose, he selected his path, deciding to become a scholar. Meanwhile, the other students were still grappling with the terrifying reality of their situation. One man, in particular, was completely overwhelmed by fear. The counselor, Qin Chuan, had no patience for the hysteria and delivered a sharp slap to the back of the man's head to snap him out of it. He then berated the student, calling him a fool for not seeing the incredible opportunity that had been presented to him. The sudden outburst silenced the entire group, and all eyes turned to the counselor. The man who was struck could only hold his head in confusion, struggling to process Qin Chuan's words. Qin Chuan began to explain that the academy was not a death trap, but a ladder to change one's fate, offering immense power and knowledge. He continued his grand speech, promising that even wealth and an extended life were within reach for those who succeeded. His words, however, were met with some skepticism. Gu Xiaoyue listened intently, analyzing every claim. Noticing her thoughtful expression, Qin Chuan seemed to address her directly, as if to counter any unspoken doubts. But his speech wasn't enough to calm everyone. Some of the students started to move, still looking for a way out. Seeing the unrest, Qin Chuan's tone changed. He raised his hand and boomed a command for everyone to stay put. As his voice echoed in the silent hall, a low hum started to emanate from the vents on the wall. In the tense silence that followed, Gu Xiaoyue and the other students stood their ground, waiting to see what would happen next. Xiaolin, however, remained calm, his focus unbroken by the strange events unfolding around him. Suddenly, the massive doors at the end of the hall slid open with a whoosh, bathing the room in an ethereal light. Meanwhile, in a separate location, an instructor watched a lone student on a monitor, clearly frustrated with the evaluation's progress. He turned away in annoyance, only to find a colleague approaching him. The other man seemed much more relaxed, walking over with a confident smirk. He casually lit a cigar, enjoying the moment while his friend stewed in frustration. Trying to lighten the mood, he threw an arm around the stressed-out instructor, offering some friendly banter about the new students. He even gave his colleague's ponytail a playful flick, but the gesture did little to ease the tension. In an instant, the students were transported to a new location. They found themselves deep inside a goblin den, a strange and foul smell assaulting their senses. The stench was overwhelming, and many, including Xiaolin, instinctively covered their faces. Just as they were trying to process the sudden change, a holographic screen materialized in front of Xiaolin. The entrance test had begun. The main task was to escape the forest within an hour, but there were also optional, high-risk objectives, killing goblins and their king. To help them, the system provided a gift pack for each student, containing a single random weapon. All around Xiaolin, other students cheered as they received their starting gear, excited by the prospect of gaining skills and experience points. Xiaolin reached out and claimed his starting weapon from the system. A staff materialized in his hand, and a notification confirmed he had unlocked basic wand mastery. He examined the magical item, a bit surprised by the outcome, but then a new idea began to form in his mind. He decided to test the weapon's power right away. With a powerful swing, he channeled energy through the staff and struck the ground. The impact left a smoking crater, a testament to the weapon's raw power. He smiled, realizing that simply using the weapon granted him experience points, and that wasn't all. He remembered his unique passive talent, the SS Top Student bonus, which would double his leveling speed, but a sudden jolt brought him back to reality. He had overlooked a critical detail. His attributes were far too low. He didn't have enough mana to use magic repeatedly. He then watched another student effortlessly gain experience just by swinging a great sword. While the others were limited by physical exhaustion, his own limitation was his small, finite mana pool. All around him, students were preparing with their physical weapons, a path that seemed far more sustainable for farming experience. Xiaolin understood. To take full advantage of his talent, he couldn't rely on magic. He needed a physical weapon. Just as Xiaolin decided he needed a physical weapon, a young woman with a sword approached him. She believed a weapon's true potential was tied to the user's specific strengths, whether it was mental fortitude or mana. The woman, Gu Xiaoyue, proposed a trade, suggesting the sword suited her far better than the staff suited him. Xiaolin considered her offer. It was the perfect solution to his problem. His immediate agreement seemed to surprise her for a moment, and just like that, the deal was done. He handed over the staff. With the sword in hand, Xiaolin felt an immediate connection. This was the right path. His weapon secured, Xiaolin's thoughts shifted to the next step, forming a team for the assessment. He turned to Gu Xiaoyue, intending to ask her to join him, but suddenly, a large, arrogant man cut in, blocking his path. The newcomer, Wang Dalin, boasted about his own high stats, trying to convince Gu Xiaoyue that he was the superior choice for a partner. He then shot a dismissive glance at Xiaolin, clearly seeing him as worthless competition. Gu Xiaoyue, however, was completely unimpressed and shut him down with a cold rejection. Enraged, Wang Dalin grabbed her, trying to intimidate her into changing her mind. The whispers of other students mocking his rejection only made the humiliated man even more furious. Seeing Wang Dalin's aggression, something inside Xiaolin snapped. The quiet student gave way to a simmering rage. Wang Dalin turned his attention to Xiaolin, dismissing him as nothing more than a weakling who should stay out of his way. But Xiaolin had seen enough. He stepped in and pushed the larger man away from Gu Xiaoyue, telling him to back off. Enraged by the defiance, Wang Dalin loomed over Xiaolin, his voice filled with menace as he threatened the young man. Xiaolin, however, didn't flinch. He met the bully's glare with a determined look of his own. Losing his patience, Wang Dalin grabbed Xiaolin by the shirt, promising to show him what real power looked like. But instead of fear, a confident smirk spread across Xiaolin's face. He calmly told the brute that he wouldn't get the chance to demonstrate his strength. Suddenly, a goblin materialized out of thin air right behind Wang Dalin, its claws ready to strike. The bully was completely caught by surprise. Before Wang Dalin could react, the creature lunged forward, slashing him across the face. He cried out in pain, stunned by the sudden and vicious ambush. The goblin didn't let up, immediately pouncing for a second attack. Despite the shock, Wang Dalin proved his skill by drawing his sword and cleaving the creature in two with a single, furious swing. He stood over the defeated monster, catching his breath. He scoffed at the idea of being ambushed by such a lowly creature. His fury, however, was now directed entirely at Xiaolin, the one who had summoned the monster and made a fool of him. Suddenly, a sound from the bushes caught his attention. He realized they were not alone. Dozens of glowing eyes stared back from the darkness. An entire horde of goblins emerged from the forest, their sheer numbers overwhelming the students. Panic erupted. The initial confidence of the students shattered as they faced the terrifying reality of the monster wave. Amidst the chaos, some fought back, desperately trying to survive the sudden and brutal onslaught. But for many, the fight was too much. They were quickly overpowered, the pain of the creature's claws feeling terrifyingly real. The battlefield descended into carnage as students fell one by one, unable to withstand the relentless attack. Xiaolin, however, stood his ground. He parried a goblin's attack, his determination unwavering despite the grim situation. Nearby, a goblin lunged at one of the female students, its claws ready to strike a fatal blow. But from a distance, Gu Xiaoyue unleashed a powerful spell, saving her classmate in the nick of time. Xiaolin dispatched another monster, watching as the creature dissolved into black particles before him. He had a grim realization. This was no game. The environment might be virtual, but the pain was real. He had been far too naive. As the other students scrambled for the safety of a nearby cave, one of them shoved Xiaolin aside in his panicked rush. But Xiaolin didn't join the retreat. A different thought was forming in his mind. He watched the others flee, understanding that hiding was only a temporary solution. It wouldn't save them. He gripped his sword tightly. He knew he couldn't just sit and wait for death. He had to understand the situation and fight. His resolve hardened. Hiding was not an option. The only way forward was to fight. So, he began to train. With every swing of his sword, he gained a sliver of experience, slowly building his strength. He was painfully aware of his low stats. It was a desperate, exhausting grind, but he pushed on. Meanwhile, the students who had sought refuge in the cave were descending into chaos. Their sanctuary was becoming a trap, and time was running out. Their attempts to fight back were useless. The monsters were too fast, and a sense of hopelessness began to spread through the group. Amidst the panic, however, Gu Xiaoyue remained perfectly calm, observing the situation with a cool, analytical gaze. Her attention was soon captured by the lone figure outside. She watched Xiaolin as he continued his relentless training. He pushed himself to the very limit, sweat pouring from his brow as he fought through the exhaustion. Gu Xiaoyue approached him, offering a cold calculation. She pointed out that, under normal circumstances, reaching level 2 would take far too long. Xiaolin paused, listening to her assessment. He knew she was right, based on standard logic. She was essentially telling him his efforts were futile, a waste of precious time. But a confident smile crept across Xiaolin's face. He had an ace up his sleeve that her calculations couldn't account for. He explained that his special buff was accelerating his progress. Against all odds, he was already on the verge of leveling up. Having proven his method, he then turned the tables, asking Gu Xiaoyue for her own analysis of the goblins. The question caught her by surprise. She realized he wasn't just swinging his sword blindly. He was thinking strategically. Gu Xiaoyue stated her position clearly, and Xiaolin acknowledged it. He was beginning to understand the kind of person she was. He took a moment to reflect on the situation. It became clear that the mission's difficulty wasn't the real issue. The true obstacle was the overwhelming terror that had paralyzed the other students. They were completely consumed by fear, their will to fight seemingly broken. While the others remained huddled in the back, Xiaolin and Gu Xiaoyue decided to press on. But their advance was cut short when a large, aggressive man stepped forward to confront them. The man immediately targeted Xiaolin, dismissing him as a weakling who would only drag them down. Gu Xiaoyue observed the tense exchange, her expression remaining neutral. The aggressive man then turned to her, questioning her decision to ally with someone so weak when their very survival was at stake. He continued to argue his point, trying to convince her that his approach was the only logical one. Gu Xiaoyue listened quietly, though she seemed more interested in how Xiaolin would respond. Just then, Xiaolin calmly interrupted, ready to take control of the conversation. His words were met with immediate resistance as one of the terrified students questioned the need to fight a boss at all. Xiaolin turned to address the entire group, realizing he had to change their mindset. He began to explain the grim reality of their situation, making it clear that simply running away was not an option. Despite the overwhelming fear, one of the students tried to rally the group, determined to fight back, but a scarred man, Wang Delin, quickly took command, shouting out his own orders to the others. He began to lay out a strategy, with Gu Xiaoyue listening beside him. She adjusted her glasses, calmly processing his aggressive plan. Then, with a simple gesture, she interrupted him, her patience clearly at its end. She held up the crystal on her staff, capturing the attention of the stunned group. Even Xiaolin was surprised by her bold move. Gu Xiaoyue then addressed everyone, proposing a different path, one of unity and cooperation to ensure they all succeeded. Wang Delin's face twisted in anger. His authority had been completely undermined. The other students hesitated, caught between the two clashing leaders. Gu Xiaoyue then turned to Xiaolin, silently asking for his support. A confident smile appeared on his face. He understood her strategy and was ready to play his part. With a new plan agreed upon, the group prepared to face the challenge waiting for them outside the cave. Just as instructed, Wang Dalin charged to the front, drawing the goblin's attention with his massive sword. From the back lines, the archers provided support, picking off targets from a safe distance. As planned, the goblins charged forward, but their ferocity was greater than anyone had anticipated. The defensive line broke almost immediately, and one of the archers found herself cornered by a monster. But just as the goblin lunged, Shaolin appeared out of nowhere, his sword raised for a strike. With a single fluid motion, he cut the creature down, earning his first official kill in this new world. The archer tried to thank him, but Shaolin was already moving, his focus entirely on the battlefield. He weaved through the chaos with an almost unnatural grace, his blade finding its mark every time. His kill count climbed rapidly as he seemed to know exactly when and where to strike for maximum effect. He was so efficient that he even intercepted a goblin an instant before an arrow could reach it. This drew the attention of the other students. One man watched with contempt, convinced Shaolin was just stealing kills. Gu Xiaoyue, however, saw something different. She noticed the precision in his movements, recognizing it not as luck, but as true skill. The intense combat was draining, but Shaolin's focus never wavered. He relied on muscle memory, honed by 2 months of non-stop grinding in an immersive VR game. It was that experience that allowed him to time his attacks so perfectly. Suddenly, a system notification popped up. His hard work had paid off. He had not only leveled up, but also unlocked a brand new skill, a powerful melee attack called Heavy Slash. With a new ability at his command and an optional quest just 1 kill away from completion, Shaolin felt a renewed sense of determination. With a final, decisive slash, Shaolin dispatched another goblin, its body dissolving into particles of light. He moved with relentless efficiency, his kill count climbing steadily as he cut through the horde. After clearing the immediate threats, the young man paused for a moment, catching his breath. Elsewhere, other students were left utterly confused as the goblins they were fighting began to vanish into thin air. One of the men stared in disbelief, unable to understand what was happening. Just then, a system announcement clarified the situation. 1/3 of the entire goblin population had already been eliminated, but any relief was short-lived as a sudden tremor shook the forest and a colossal shadow fell over the land. A monstrous figure emerged from the trees, dwarfing the landscape as it stared down at Shaolin. It was the dungeon boss, the Goblin King, and it was furious. The king unleashed a deafening roar, sending a powerful shockwave across the entire battlefield. The sonic blast was agonizing, forcing the other students to cover their ears in pain. Overwhelmed by the creature's sheer presence, terror began to spread through their ranks. Yet, amidst the growing panic, Shaolin stood firm, with Gu Xiaoyue right behind him. She quickly warned him about the boss's weaknesses and strengths, but it was too late. The Goblin King's glowing eyes were already locked onto them despite the overwhelming presence of the boss. Shaolin remembered the battles that led him to this moment and steeled his resolve. But his companions were not so brave. Sheer terror had taken hold of them. One student couldn't take it anymore and decided to run, abandoning the group to save himself. Shaolin knew this was a fatal mistake. The man's panicked escape would surely draw the creature's attention. And he was right. The Goblin King's sharp senses immediately locked onto the new sound. Its glowing eyes shifted, finding its new prey. The monster abandoned its original targets and charged after the fleeing student with terrifying speed. However, another man refused to back down, his face a mask of grim determination. He tried to rally the others, convinced that their superior numbers would be enough to overwhelm the beast. Filled with confidence, the man leaped forward, raising his sword for a powerful overhead strike. The Goblin King watched the reckless attack with a cold, unblinking eye. The man's blade struck the monster's arm, but the blow was easily deflected. With a single, effortless motion, the creature countered the attack. The overconfident warrior was sent flying, defeated in an instant. As the man's body dissolved into particles, The group watched in stunned silence. Xiaolin's original plan was now in shambles. The warriors' instant defeat sent a shockwave of terror through the group, shattering their morale. In the chaos, another student charged forward, driven by desperation. But the Goblin King was relentless, stomping him into the ground without a second thought. The monster then swung its massive club, scattering the remaining students like bowling pins. The force of the blow sent one of the women flying helplessly through the air. Suddenly, a blast of purple energy struck the creature's side. The Goblin King barely registered the hit, looking at its hand with mild annoyance as its health remained nearly full. Gu Xiaoyue grit her teeth in frustration. She realized that attacking its limbs was useless. She had to aim for the vitals to do any real damage. Her original strategy depended on the others distracting the beast while she attacked from a distance. But with the formation broken and her allies scattered, that plan was now in ruins. Standing alone before the colossal monster, she knew she had to think of something else. The Goblin King raised its club, its shadow falling over her as it prepared for the final blow. Just then, a sudden movement caught her eye, and her expression changed from despair to surprise. From behind the beast, Xiaolin lunged forward, his sword crackling with energy, ready to strike. The Goblin King immediately turned its furious gaze toward the new challenger. Xiaolin narrowly dodged the creature's massive club, using the weapon itself as a platform to leap away. He landed firmly, bracing himself on the cracked ground. In that split second, Xiaolin finally understood the monster's attack pattern. It always prioritized the closest target. With this new insight, he quickly formulated a plan and turned to get the others' attention. The archer, however, remained hidden, still paralyzed by fear. But then, another woman, Gu Xiaoyue, stepped forward, her staff ready. The two women prepared their ranged attacks, coordinating their efforts from a safe distance. A barrage of magical energy and arrows rained down upon the Goblin King. For a moment, it seemed their strategy was working as intended, but the assault only served to enrage the beast beyond measure. It clenched its fists, gathering a terrifying amount of energy. With a roar, the monster slammed its fists into the ground, unleashing a devastating shockwave. The archer was caught in the blast, and though Xiaolin reached out to help, he couldn't get to her in time. The Goblin King stood over the chaos, having effortlessly broken their coordinated attack. With the archer defeated, only Xiaolin and Gu Xiaoyue remained standing against the monstrous foe. Gu Xiaoyue, however, showed no signs of fear, a confident smirk playing on her lips. Xiaolin felt a similar surge of determination. He remembered his past, being called useless and a loser. But the brief moment of confidence passed, and Gu Xiaoyue braced herself, knowing the real fight was just beginning. Xiaolin offered a reassuring glance, a silent promise that things would be different this time. A confident smile formed on his face. He decided that this was his turn to shine on the battlefield, and a strange power began to awaken within him. His unique talent activated, manifesting a spectral figure behind him. Channeling the new energy, he dug his feet into the ground, preparing to launch himself forward. In that instant, a system notification appeared. He had copied the Goblin King's most powerful skill, Shockwave. With the enemy's own power now at his disposal, Xiaolin readied his sword for a counterattack. He charged toward the giant beast, his theory about his talent finally proven correct. He knew the copied skill had a cooldown, so he had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. With absolute focus, he watched the monster's attack descend upon him. At the very last second, he met the creature's powerful fist with his sword, unleashing the shockwave to parry the devastating blow. The clash of powers confirmed his theory. The monster's ultimate skill could, in fact, be interrupted. Thrown off balance, the beast recoiled, surprised by the human's unexpected resistance. Despite the overwhelming size difference, Shaolin stood his ground, his gamble having paid off. With his reasoning proven correct, he prepared for the next phase of his plan. But the Goblin King wasn't finished. It gathered its energy for another devastating attack. A sphere of dark energy erupted from its palm, hurtling directly toward Shaolin. The enraged beast even conjured a cursed weapon, adding its power to the assault. Watching from afar, Gu Xiaoyue was in disbelief. A newcomer had somehow managed to stop the Goblin King's signature move. Frustrated, the monster abandoned its magic and wound up for a purely physical strike, intending to crush him with brute force. Shaolin realized he was far too close. There was no room to completely dodge the incoming blow. Yet, instead of fear, a confident smirk spread across his face. This was exactly what he had been waiting for. He met the giant's fist, not with his sword, but with his bare hand, which now pulsed with the very same power he had copied. The sheer force of the impact stunned Gu Xiaoyu, who could only watch the impossible unfold. As the dust settled, Xiaolin stood firm, reassuring his teammate he was fine. He had used the shockwave again, but now his trump card was on cooldown. The Goblin King roared in fury, but Xiaolin knew he couldn't retreat. His copied skill was only effective at point-blank range. With his main skill on cooldown, Xiaolin resorted to a risky maneuver, sliding directly under the massive beast to strike its center of gravity. Just as he reached the perfect spot, a system notification confirmed his timing was impeccable. His skill was available once more. He unleashed a powerful upward strike, channeling all his energy into the attack. But a sudden flash of light from another direction caught him completely by surprise. It was Gu Xiaoyu, who had launched a powerful magical assault of her own, striking the beast at the exact same moment. The combined power of their attacks was overwhelming, and the Goblin King's health bar plummeted to nearly zero. The massive creature began to pixelate and dissolve, its form breaking apart under the immense damage. As the monster vanished completely, its sword fell to the ground with a final metallic clang. Xiaolin breathed a heavy sigh of relief, the exhaustion finally setting in as he realized they had actually won. Back in the real world, Gu Xiaoyue awoke with a start, the memories of the virtual battle still vivid. She looked around, disoriented as she emerged from the simulation pod. Meanwhile, in an observation room, the instructors of Dawn Academy were already analyzing the test results. The head of admissions delivered a summary, announcing that a total of 15 recruits had achieved the coveted S-rank rating. This unexpectedly high number caused a stir among the other instructors, who began to discuss the new batch of students. One instructor smirked with confidence, while his colleague beside him seemed less than impressed by his attitude. In the observation room, an official sarcastically congratulated the instructor of Class 7 on his student's performance over the past decade. The instructor, Qin Chuan, listened with a heavy heart, clearly disappointed with his class's results. But then, the official mentioned that despite the lack of top-tier talent, his class had managed to set 2 new school records. He began to elaborate on the first accomplishment. One of Qin Chuan's students had broken the record for the highest intelligence attribute ever recorded for a freshman at Dawn Academy. The second record, however, was for the exact opposite, the lowest overall attributes in the Academy's history. The official noted the irony that these 2 polar opposite records belonged to the only 2 S-rated students in the same class, a fact that had even captured the principal's attention. Meanwhile, Shaolin came to his senses, realizing with a shock that all the wounds he sustained during the simulation had completely vanished. He checked his status and confirmed that he had somehow survived and completed the first task, despite blacking out near the end. His thoughts immediately went to Gu Xiaoyue, wondering if she was the one who had carried him to safety. Just then, a grateful classmate ran up to him, calling his name with relief. She thanked both Xiaolin and Gu Xiaoyue, admitting she never would have achieved an A rating without their help. The young woman lamented her own performance, recalling how she had been taken out by the boss's final attack. She was overjoyed when Xiaolin confirmed that they had indeed defeated the Goblin King after she fell. Their celebration was cut short when another man appeared, his expression serious, stating he needed to speak with Xiaolin privately about the battle. The man expressed his frustration, believing Xiaolin's success was just a fluke. He then called out to the young man, saying he wanted to speak with him privately about the recent battle. But before Xiaolin could respond, Gu Xiaoyue stepped in front of him. She pulled the protagonist aside into a quiet corner, away from the others. She revealed that the nameplate everyone received had a built-in communication system and suggested they add each other as friends. To do so, she needed his student ID. Xiaolin paused for a moment, processing the new information. The two continued their conversation in the secluded hallway. He confidently told her he didn't know his ID, as he was one of the students who had received a failing grade on the entrance exam. Gu Xiaoyue held up her own nameplate, ready to guide him. She explained that he just needed to think of the words "smart brain" to bring up his basic information panel. Xiaolin focused, following her instructions. A holographic screen materialized before him, displaying his name, student ID, and surprisingly low basic attributes. Seeing that he had accessed the system, Gu Xiaoyue asked for his student ID once more. A moment later, a friend request from her appeared on his screen. Without a second thought, Xiaolin accepted her friend request. The system processed the command, officially linking their accounts. Just then, a loud voice cut through the chatter. An instructor ordered all the students to assemble at the central playground immediately. The man, Qin Chuan, then singled out Gu Xiaoyue, calling her over. Gu Xiaoyu acknowledged him and started to walk, with Xiaolin following close behind. To find his way, Xiaolin brought up the academy's map on his holographic display. While checking the route, he couldn't help but wonder why the instructor had specifically called for her. When he arrived at the playground, he saw that it was already packed with people. The sheer number of students gathering in one place was staggering. Gu Xiaoyue noticed his reaction and checked if he was all right, while Xiaolin worried he might have said something he shouldn't have. Suddenly, a commotion erupted as someone shouted for people to clear a path. A group of students, led by a confident young man with blue hair, pushed their way through the crowd. They walked up to a small hill, positioning themselves above everyone else. The blue-haired leader then proudly displayed a glowing crystal, placing it on a pedestal for all to see. Just as a man began to formally welcome the new students, the ceremony was abruptly interrupted. A sudden dark presence cast a shadow over the field, catching Xiaolin completely off guard. Panic spread like wildfire through the crowd as everyone looked up in terror. A massive, terrifying dragon descended from the sky, its sheer size blotting out the sun. Xiaolin could only stare, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible sight before him. The beast let out a roar that seemed to shake the students to their very core. A primal fear seized Xiaolin, paralyzing his body completely. He couldn't even think to move. While the others were frozen in terror, Gu Xiaoyue simply looked on with an expression of pure annoyance. But the dragon wasn't there to attack. It landed with surprising grace, revealing an old man riding on its back. The rider possessed an aura of immense power and wisdom. This was the principal of Dawn Academy, making his grand entrance. The blue-haired student cheekily commented on the principal's overly dramatic arrival. The old man, however, was not in the mood for jokes and immediately shut the student down. He explained that he was simply short on time and had to use the dragon for transport. Xiaolin watched the bizarre interaction, trying to make sense of the powerful and eccentric figures who ran this academy. The principal of Dawn Academy stood before the students, his presence immediately silencing the crowd. His sharp gaze swept over the new arrivals, assessing the potential of this new generation. Xiaolin watched from the crowd, feeling the immense pressure emanating from the old man. The principal struck his staff against the ground, and a pulse of magical energy rippled through the air, demanding everyone's full attention. He began to speak, but his words were less important than the massive dragon that materialized behind him, a clear display of his power. He then turned to an instructor, making a light-hearted complaint about the late-night admissions. The students, however, were too tense and confused to appreciate the old man's attempt at humor. Seeing their faces, the principal's demeanor shifted back to serious. It was time to give them the answers they craved. He addressed them not as students, but as children from the old world, a title that hinted at a much larger destiny. He then revealed their true purpose. They were pioneers, destined for a place called Planet Norma, the New World. The sole mission of Dawn Academy, he explained, was to train them to conquer this new, untamed land. And to kickstart this mission, he announced a special opportunity. The top 3 freshmen would get to enter the New World early. He spoke of them becoming powerful mages, but an instructor tried to interrupt, concerned for the safety of the new students. The principal silenced the objection with a single look. He wasn't just training them to survive, he was training them to rule. His speech ended with a final dramatic flourish, leaving the students in a state of shock and awe at the future laid before them. The headmaster's decision was final, a declaration that left no room for argument. However, one of the instructors couldn't stay silent, stepping forward to voice his concerns about the freshmen's safety. A single sharp glance from the headmaster was all it took to stop the man in his tracks. The instructor immediately backed down, realizing he had seriously overstepped his bounds. With the matter settled, the headmaster dismissed the assembly, his authority now absolute. Xiaolin watched the exchange, finding the headmaster's reaction a bit extreme. Something about this new rule felt off, but he quickly decided to focus on his own goals. His priority was to use the academy's resources to get stronger. Just as he was about to leave, a man called out to him, telling him to stay behind for a moment. Xiaolin was caught off guard, wondering what this could possibly be about. The man, Counselor Qin Chuan, explained that since the top-ranked student had refused the position, the role of class monitor now fell to Xiaolin. A notification suddenly appeared before him, officially appointing him as the acting monitor of freshman class 7. With his duty done, the counselor simply waved and walked away, leaving Xiaolin with this sudden responsibility. Xiaolin was left to process the unexpected turn of events. Later that day, he made his way to the student dormitories to get settled. At the reception desk, a staff member went over the dorm rules, her tone professional and routine. But her professional demeanor shifted the moment she heard his new title. The staff member was suddenly full of admiration, realizing he was the acting monitor. Her attitude changed completely. She enthusiastically offered to personally guide Xiaolin to his room and help him get his supplies. She quickly handed him his new school uniform. To his surprise, she led him to a spacious single dorm, explaining that this was a privilege exclusive to monitors. She then handed him his ID tag, a crucial item for navigating life at the academy. The woman, introducing herself as Zhang Tingting, offered her friendship and help with any future questions, giving him a friendly wink. As she waved goodbye, Xiaolin couldn't help but notice how much friendlier she had become. He realized that his new title was the sole reason for her sudden change in attitude. Alone in his new room, Xiaolin put the interaction aside and focused on what he needed to do next. He accessed the academy system, and an overwhelming list of available courses materialized before him. The sheer number of options was daunting, and he knew he had to choose carefully. But then, he remembered his greatest advantage, the prodigy passive skill, which doubled his learning efficiency. He couldn't afford to waste it. With a clear strategy in mind, he began to navigate the interface and select his courses. He finalized his schedule, choosing a mix of combat and general knowledge classes, ready to begin his intensive training. Xiaolin immediately began his swordsmanship training, striking the wooden dummies with all his might. His prodigy talent activated, allowing him to quickly grasp the fundamentals of the technique. He realized that by mastering the basics, he could achieve a level of speed he never thought possible. In just an hour and a half, he had already reached level 3 in basic swordsmanship, a feat that was twice as fast as anyone else. However, the relentless training left him completely exhausted and on the verge of collapse. Just as he was catching his breath, another student approached, questioning his right to even be in the class. But their bickering was cut short by the substitute teacher, a third-year student named Chung Na, who declared that no one was leaving until they reached level 3. The other students were thrown into despair, knowing such a task would take them hours of grueling work. The weight of the instructor's demand was heavy, and many felt it was an impossible challenge. Undeterred, Xiaolin stood up, catching the attention of instructor Chung Na. He walked towards her, ready to report his progress. The instructor looked down at him, her expression a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. When Xiaolin claimed he had already reached level 3, she was taken aback, finding it hard to believe that a freshman could progress so quickly on the very first day.